Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. I made a video a week or so ago. I make so many videos I lose track of what I've done when, but it was about Tyson Fury saying that don't write him off just yet because of the Ngannou debacle. Yes, he looked absolutely awful against Ngannou, and we know the story behind that whole fight. And taking nothing away from Ngannou, yeah, Fury looked terrible, absolutely terrible. But don't write him off. And a lot of people have said to me, what are you talking about? I mean, the guy looked awful. He's so obviously over the hill. And well, I agree that he's on the downside of his career, no doubt about it. And I think the Fury, the sort of mover and shaker that we saw against Vladimir Klitschko, and certainly in the first Wilder fight, I don't think we're going to see that guy again. But there is one example that makes me always puts a block in the way of me thinking that a fighter might be completely finished, or that a fighter hasn't got one last great performance in him. And that fighter is Evander Holyfield. And the fight in question, well, actually, let's talk about the build-up to the fight in question, because Evander Holyfield in 1996 had one fight. And that was to Bobby Czyz, the former light heavy and cruiserweight title holder. And he retired Czyz in 5 rounds. Czyz, it was meant to be he had a bad back, then he perhaps had some substance in his eyes, but it effectively looked like he quit, to be honest with you. And I like Bobby Czyz, he's a brave guy, and his backstory is quite interesting, and he won a couple of titles. So who am I to cast aspersions? I don't like using that Q word. But he did look like he quit, to be honest with you. He looked like he'd had enough. He just. But Evander Holyfield looked absolutely terrible in that fight. Absolutely terrible. And that was the only fight he'd had so far in '96. And prior to that, in '95, he'd been knocked out in the rubber match against Riddick Bowe. He'd been knocked out in 8 rounds. His other fight in 1995 was against Ray Mercer, and that was a terrific fight. He had Mercer on the floor. I think that was the first time Mercer was knocked down. It was with a body punch. But Holyfield had a real war with a guy who was, a big, strong fella. Holyfield won a unanimous decision, deservedly. But he was given something to think about, and it was putting more miles on the clock. Now, prior to that, in '94, he had lost his world titles to Michael Moorer. In '93 he won the titles back against Riddick Bowe, the IBF and the WBA title. Anyway, the WBO wasn't really around then. It was around, but it wasn't considered to have any great worth. Kind of like the IBO today. And then he lost them both in '94 to Michael Moorer. So when it was announced he would fight Mike Tyson in November of 1996, a lot of people thought, well, let's have a look back now. He's only won 2 of his last 4. He got knocked out by Riddick Bowe. He got outpointed by Michael Moorer. He's meant to have a heart condition after the Moorer fight. There was some sort of heart murmur. He's going to be fodder for Mike Tyson. And yeah, like I say, against Czyz, which was like 6 months previous, he looked terrible. Now, compare this to Mike Tyson, who was rampaging at the time, or so we thought. He'd come out of prison. He had a few build-up fights. He'd beaten Frank Bruno in 3 rounds to win the WBC title. And then he had beaten Bruce Seldon in a round. And that was for the WBA title. So it was WBC and WBA titles he had. And that was in 1996 alone. And there he was going into a 3rd fight for the year against Evander Holyfield, and was strongly favoured to beat Holyfield. He was I think some people had him like 25-1 to win that fight. But as we know, it didn't work out that way. Somehow Holyfield. I watched that fight live. It was one of the final 2 pay-per-views that I bought. The second one being the rematch. We know what happened with that one, the old ear nibble. But I remember watching the first fight and thinking, if Holyfield can go the distance, if he can last to the later rounds, it will be a hell of a thing. And Holyfield started very well, and he started to dominate Tyson. And he started to beat him up. And then when he floored him, when he actually floored the guy, it was. I must have hit the roof, because even though Mike Tyson had lost to Buster Douglas, the myth still existed to some extent. There was an argument that that was an aberration. In reality, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back historically, Mike Tyson was never the same when he left Kevin Rooney as trainer and Bill Caton. He did have some good wins, some very good wins. You know, he beat Razor Ruddock twice. They were two very good fights. And he actually showed something that he never showed in the rest of his career, and that is a bit of mettle, a bit of mental fortitude. Because Ruddock was exchanging with him. And the first fight was stopped prematurely in 7 rounds. The second fight, unanimous decision to Tyson. A wide unanimous decision. But so he kind of showed a bit of fortitude in there, which previously you thought, I don't know, he took his lumps against Douglas as well, you know, but it kind of ticked another box. So we were all expecting Mike Tyson to destroy Evander Holyfield, and he didn't. You know what happened? He got smashed up, he got floored, and he got stopped in 11 rounds. Now, of course, like any comparison, you can't compare Mike Tyson to Tyson Fury. 2 different fighters, 2 different opponents. Fury's got Usyk coming up. Although Usyk is advanced in age, but he's been looking very, very good, you know, throughout his whole career, never mind his recent form. Undefeated, and whereas Holyfield, like I just said, clearly wasn't. At the time, Holyfield was 32 wins and 3 defeats, 1 by stoppage, when he fought Mike Tyson. Usyk, of course, has never come close to losing. So yes, the comparisons are, no 2 comparisons are ever complete. They're never, you know, full. You can always pick fault with them. But nevertheless, the lesson learned from that, for me as someone of the age I am who watched those fights live that I talked about earlier, the lesson I learned was you never ever write off another guy. You never ever write off another guy. In fact, I didn't write off Holyfield. I just thought he was a rank outsider, and I fully expected Mike Tyson to win. Fully expected it. But it does prove, as Holyfield proved, that a fighter can have maybe not just one last great hurrah, but a string of fights. Because Holyfield, when he beat Tyson, he defended those titles, you know, several times. So I wouldn't write Fury off yet. If Fury can get himself into physical and mental shape and actually wants to fight, if he's determined, if he sees a challenge in Usyk, and he's allowed enough time to get himself physically fit, because he's not that old. I mean, Holyfield was no spring chicken when he fought Mike Tyson, and had a lot more miles on the clock than Tyson Fury probably does. But if Fury can get himself in shape, do not be surprised if he gives at least a very good account of himself against Usyk. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you're only as good as your last fight, because if you were, Tyson Fury should hang him up right now. And it can happen. It can happen. You can, you know, people can have this Indian summer of their career. You know, who would have thought that Lee Wood would lose to Jazza Dickens, and was it Gavin McDonald he lost to by stoppage, and then go on to have such a great career? Self-belief, discipline, determination, living the life. It can all pay immense dividends, even if you're at the back end of your career. So yeah, I'm not saying that Fury necessarily beats Usyk. I always thought he probably would if he was in physical and mental shape, you know, kind of outpoint him. But Usyk is probably most people's favourite right now to beat Tyson Fury. But it's not a given. Not a given. Not if Fury wants it to be a competitive fight. If he wants it to be a competitive fight, if he wants to win, if he's determined and he has the same sort of steely courage that he had in some of his other fights, he can make this very, very interesting. And he's certainly capable of beating Usyk. He certainly is. I'm not saying he will, but at the moment, I don't know. The jury's still out, because that Ngannou thing was so out of left field. I just think, Jesus Christ. But yeah, thoughts below. Are you like me, old enough to remember certain fighters who turned the tables? Let me know, you know, what your memories are. And yeah, leave your comments below. Thank you, as always, for listening and for watching this video. And subscribe to the channel if you're new. And please hit the like button as well, and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. I will catch you later. Bye for now.